I am sitting in my corner office watching the city lights flicker below as evening settles in. My phone buzzes with a text message from a number I have not seen in 3 years. Mom. The word feels foreign after so long. My heart races as memories flood back of the most difficult decision I ever made. 3 years ago, I refused to pay my sister's college tuition, and my parents disowned me for it. Now, out of nowhere, they want me back. But what happened in those 3 years changes everything. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe, if you have not already. This story gets incredibly intense, and I promise you will want to stay until the end to see how everything unfolded. Let me take you back to where this all began. I grew up in a small town outside Denver, with my parents Robert and Linda, and my younger sister Sophia. Dad worked as a mechanic at the local garage, coming home every night with oil-stained hands and tired eyes. Mom worked retail at the department store, always cheerful with customers, but exhausted by the time she got home. We were not poor, but money was always tight. From as early as I can remember, I was the responsible one. While other kids played after school, I was helping Mom with dinner, making sure Sophia did her homework, and keeping the house organized. My parents called me their little helper, and I wore that title with pride. I thought it meant I was special, that I was contributing something valuable to our family. Sophia, on the other hand, was the baby. 2 years younger than me, she had this natural charm that made everyone want to take care of her. When she forgot her homework, Mom would write excuse notes. When she wanted something at the store, Dad would find a way to buy it, even if it meant skipping lunch for a week. She was beautiful and funny, and everyone loved her instantly. I did not resent her for it then. I thought this was just how families worked. School came easily to me. I studied hard-joined honor society and dreamed of going to college. I knew it would be expensive, so I started working part-time at 16, saving every penny I could. I worked at the local diner on weekends, serving coffee and pancakes to truckers and early morning commuters. The work was hard, but I loved the independence and the feeling that I was building something for myself. Sophia struggled in school. Math was particularly difficult for her, and she often came home frustrated and crying. I spent hours tutoring her, helping her understand concepts that seemed to slide right out of her head the next day. Mom and Dad were grateful for my help, but they never seemed worried about her grades the way they had been about mine. When I brought home anything less than an A, there were serious conversations about my future. When Sophia brought home C's and D's, they said she was just different, that not everyone was academic. By my senior year, I had saved nearly $12,000 for college. It was not enough for a 4-year university, but it was a start. I applied for every scholarship I could find and was accepted to Colorado State University with partial financial aid. The remaining costs would require student loans, but I was determined to make it work. This was my chance to build a different kind of life, to use my mind in ways that excited me. I majored in marketing and threw myself into my studies. I worked at the campus bookstore to pay for textbooks and food, often studying until 2 in the morning before opening shifts at 6. It was exhausting, but every good grade felt like a step toward the future I was creating for myself. I graduated summa cum laude and landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Denver. The job was everything I had hoped for. I was creating campaigns, analyzing data, and working with clients who valued my ideas. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. I was making decent money, paying down my student loans, and saving for my own apartment. I had never been happier. Meanwhile, Sophia had graduated high school with mediocre grades and no clear direction. She talked about maybe going to cosmetology school or finding a job at the mall. Mom and Dad seemed content with whatever she wanted to do, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes when they talked about their friends whose children were going to college. Everything changed on a Sunday afternoon in October. Mom called and asked me to come over for dinner, saying they wanted to discuss something important as a family. I drove over expecting maybe news about Dad's health or plans for the holidays. Instead, I walked into what felt like an intervention. The three of them were sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived, and the atmosphere was strangely formal. Dad cleared his throat and began explaining that Sophia had decided she wanted to go to college after all. She had applied to several schools and been accepted to Metropolitan State University, but her grades meant no academic scholarships. The cost would be about $45,000 over 4 years. I congratulated Sophia, genuinely happy that she was motivated to continue her education. Then, Mom dropped the bomb. They had all discussed it, and they believed I should pay for Sophia's college education. Not help with it, not contribute to it, but pay for all of it. I sat there in stunned silence as they explained their reasoning. I had been given opportunities that Sophia had not had. I was naturally smarter and had always found school easier. It was only fair that I help give Sophia the same chances I had enjoyed. Dad said that family members support each other, and since I was doing well financially, this was my way to give back. The shock was overwhelming. I had worked since I was 16, saved every dollar studied until I was exhausted, and taken on debt to pay for my own education. Now they were telling me it was my obligation to do the same for Sophia, who had spent high school socializing and doing the bare minimum in her classes. I tried to explain my financial situation. I was still paying off my own student loans. I was saving to buy a house. My salary was good for someone my age, but $45,000 was more than I made in a year. I suggested alternatives. Maybe Sophia could start at community college and transfer later. Maybe she could apply for financial aid or look for academic improvement programs that offered scholarships. But they had already made up their minds. Sophia sat there looking hurt and confused, like I was deliberately trying to ruin her life. Mom kept saying that I had always been selfish, that even as a child, I had trouble sharing. Dad reminded me of all the times they had sacrificed for me, conveniently forgetting that I had worked for everything I had. The conversation grew heated. I pointed out that I had never asked them to pay for my college, that I had worked multiple jobs, and taken on debt specifically to avoid being a financial burden on the family. But somehow that was being twisted into evidence that I owed Sophia an easier path than the one I had chosen. Then, Sophia spoke up for the first time. With tears in her eyes, she said she had already told her friends that her sister was paying for her college. She had been accepted to the sorority she wanted to join, and had made plans based on the assumption that money would not be an issue. She looked at me with such disappointment, like I was destroying dreams she had every right to have. That is when I realized this was not a discussion. This was a demand. They had made plans and commitments on my behalf without ever asking if I was willing or able to fulfill them. They had decided what my money should be used, for what my priorities should be, and what kind of sister I ought to be. I took a deep breath and told them I could not do it. I explained that I was willing to help Sophia in other ways. I could tutor her to improve her grades for scholarship applications. I could help her apply for financial aid. I could give her advice on managing college expenses. But I could not and would not take on the full financial responsibility for her education. The room erupted. Mom accused me of being jealous of Sophia, of wanting to keep her down so I could be the only successful daughter. Dad said I had forgotten where I came from and that success had made me cruel. Sophia cried and said she should have known I would find a way to hurt her. Nothing I said seemed to matter. I tried explaining that I was not trying to hurt anyone, that I simply could not afford to take on that level of debt for someone else's education. I pointed out that requiring me to pay would actually harm my own financial stability and future prospects. But they saw this as selfishness, not responsible financial planning. The argument lasted for hours. Voices were raised, old grievances were brought up, and things were said that could never be taken back. Mom told me I had always been cold and calculating that even as a child, I had put my own interests above the family's needs. Dad said I had been given advantages that I was now cruelly denying to Sophia. They painted me as someone who had succeeded at their expense and was now refusing to repay the debt. But I knew the truth. I had worked for everything I had. I had made sacrifices they had never acknowledged. I had taken on financial responsibility for my own education, while Sophia had been free to focus on her social life. Now they wanted me to take on financial responsibility for her education too, while she continued to be free from the burden of paying her own way. The breaking point came when Dad told me that if I would not help my sister, I was no longer welcome in their home. Mom nodded in agreement, saying that a daughter who would not support her family when she had the means was not really their daughter at all. They gave me an ultimatum: pay for Sophia's college or lose my family forever. I looked at Sophia, hoping she would say something, anything, to indicate that she understood this was unfair. But she just sat there crying, acting like I was the villain in her story. She had been raised to believe that other people would solve her problems, and now I was refusing to play that role. I stood up from the table and told them I loved them, but I could not sacrifice my financial future for Sophia's college experience. I said I hoped we could find a way to work through this, but I would not be manipulated into taking on debt I could not afford. Dad stood up and told me to leave. As I gathered my purse and coat, Mom told me not to bother coming back until I was ready to do right by my sister. Sophia said nothing, but the look she gave me was pure accusation, like I had chosen to be cruel when I could have chosen to be generous. I drove home in a state of shock. In one evening, I had gone from being a beloved daughter and sister to being treated like an enemy of the family. The worst part was that I could see their perspective, even though I disagreed with it. In their minds, I had been blessed with abilities and opportunities that had led to success, and now I was refusing to share those blessings with someone who needed them. But they could not see my perspective. They could not acknowledge the work I had put in, the sacrifices I had made, or the financial realities I was facing. To them, my success looked effortless, and my refusal to share it looked selfish. The next few weeks were torture. I kept expecting them to call and apologize, or at least to call and try to find a compromise. Instead, I heard nothing. When I called them, my calls went straight to voicemail. When I texted, I got no response. It was like I had ceased to exist. Through mutual friends, I learned that Sophia had enrolled in community college instead of the university. But rather than taking responsibility for her choice, the family narrative was that I had forced her into a lesser option by refusing to help. I was painted as the sister who had abandoned her family when they needed her most. The isolation was devastating. Holidays came and went without invitations. My birthday passed unacknowledged. When I drove by their house, I could see cars in the driveway for family gatherings that I was no longer part of. I had been erased from their lives as completely as if I had never existed. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I was free to make decisions based on my own needs and priorities. I did not have to worry about whether my choices would disappoint them or whether I was living up to their expectations. I could simply focus on building the life I wanted. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, stayed late to help colleagues, and volunteered for assignments that others avoided. My dedication was noticed, and within 18 months, I received a promotion to senior marketing specialist. The raise allowed me to accelerate my loan payments and start saving seriously for a house. 3 years passed in a strange mixture of success and loneliness. Professionally, I was thriving. I had been promoted again this time to marketing manager, with a team of 5 people reporting to me. I had paid off my student loans completely and saved enough to put a down payment on a small house in a nice neighborhood. By every objective measure, my life was going well. But the absence of my family was a constant ache. I spent holidays alone or with friends who took pity on me. I celebrated promotions and achievements without anyone who had known me as a child. I had pictures of my parents and Sophia in a drawer, but I stopped looking at them because they hurt too much. I tried reaching out a few times over the years. I sent a card on Mom's birthday with a note saying I missed her. I texted Dad when I heard through friends that he had been in a minor car accident. I reached out to Sophia when she graduated from community college with her associate's degree. But every attempt was met with silence. Through the grapevine, I learned bits and pieces about their lives. Sophia had dropped out of community college after her first year and was working various retail jobs. She had moved back in with our parents and seemed to be struggling to find direction. Dad's health was declining, and Mom was working extra hours to make ends meet. They had taken on debt to pay for Sophia's brief college experience, and money was tighter than ever. Then, on a Tuesday evening in late October, my phone buzzed with a text message that changed everything. It was from Mom's number, a message that simply said, "Honey, your father and I miss you so much. Is there any way we could talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding. After 3 years of silence, after being told I was no longer their daughter, they were reaching out. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let them experience a little more of the silence they had imposed on me. But a bigger part of me was desperate to reconnect with the family I had lost. I texted back, "I would like that very much." Mom called within minutes, and her voice was smaller than I remembered, tentative and careful. She said they had made a terrible mistake, that they had let pride and anger keep them from their daughter for far too long. She said Dad's health problems had made them realize how fragile life was, how stupid they had been to throw away precious time with me over money. Dad got on the phone and apologized in a way that sounded genuine. He said he had been wrong to give me an ultimatum, wrong to expect me to sacrifice my financial security for Sophia's education. He said he understood now that I had worked for everything I had, that my success was not something I owed to anyone else. But even as they apologized, I could hear the desperation in their voices. Dad's medical bills were mounting. Mom was exhausted from working overtime. Sophia was still living at home, still struggling to find her way. They needed me not just emotionally, but financially. Their apology felt real, but so did their need. I agreed to meet them for lunch the following Saturday. As I drove to the restaurant, I felt like I was 18 again, nervous about disappointing them, hoping they would be proud of me. But I was also different now. 3 years of independence had taught me that I could survive without their approval, that my worth was not determined by their opinion of me. The reunion was emotional. Mom cried when she saw me, and Dad looked older and frailer than I remembered. Sophia was there too, and she seemed genuinely sorry for the pain she had caused. She told me she had learned a lot about responsibility in the past 3 years, that she understood now how hard I had worked for my success. They asked about my job, my house, my life. For the first time, they seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my accomplishments, without immediately figuring out how those accomplishments could benefit the family. It felt like they were seeing me as a person, rather than as a resource. But as the conversation continued, the real reason for the reconciliation became clear. Dad needed surgery that would cost thousands of dollars, even with insurance. Mom was at risk of losing her job due to the company downsizing. Sophia was considering going back to school, but would need financial support to make it work. They did not ask for money directly, but the implication was clear. They wanted me back in their lives, and they wanted my financial support for the challenges they were facing. It was the same dynamic that had torn us apart 3 years earlier, just dressed up in different circumstances. But something had changed in me during those 3 years of exile. I had learned that love should not come with financial conditions, that being family does not mean being obligated to sacrifice your own security for someone else's choices. I had also learned that I could survive and thrive without their approval, which meant I could engage with them from a position of strength rather than desperation. I told them I was grateful for their apology and that I wanted them back in my life. But I also told them that any relationship we rebuilt would have to be based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. I would not be guilted into financial decisions that compromised my own stability, and I would not accept ultimatums about what kind of daughter or sister I should be. I offered to help with Dad's medical expenses, within my means, but not at the cost of my own financial goals. I suggested resources for Sophia to explore financial aid and scholarship opportunities if she wanted to return to school, but I made it clear that I would not be paying her tuition. I told them I loved them, but that love could not be conditional on my willingness to solve their financial problems. To their credit, they accepted my terms. Dad said he understood why I needed to protect myself, and Mom admitted that they had been wrong to make financial demands a condition of family membership. Sophia thanked me for the help I was offering and promised to take responsibility for her own educational goals. The rebuilding process has been slow but genuine. We have dinner together once a month, and the conversations feel more honest than they ever did before. I helped Dad research payment plans for his surgery, and he got the treatment he needed without bankrupting the family. Mom found a new job with better benefits, and Sophia enrolled in a professional certification program that she is paying for herself through part-time work. Most importantly, they have stopped seeing me as a bank account with family obligations attached. They ask about my life because they care about me, not because they are calculating whether my success can solve their problems. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like they see me as a complete person, rather than as a collection of useful resources. The 3 years I lost with them were painful, but they were also necessary. I needed to learn that I could stand on my own, that my worth was not determined by my usefulness to others. They needed to learn that love cannot be leveraged for financial gain, that family relationships require respect for individual boundaries and choices. Now, when I sit in my office looking out at the city lights, I do not feel the isolation that haunted me for so long. I have a family again, but it is a family built on honesty rather than obligation, on love rather than financial utility. I still get frustrated with them sometimes, and they still do not always understand my choices. But we have learned to disagree, without destroying each other to love, without conditions to be family, without losing ourselves in the process. Sometimes the hardest thing we can do for the people we love is to let them learn their own lessons, even when it breaks our heart to watch them struggle. So I want to ask you, have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who expected you to sacrifice your own goals for theirs? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Share this video with someone who might be facing similar family pressures. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you remember that loving your family does not mean losing yourself. Take care of yourselves, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no.